This morning is kind of like a family meeting. And so family meetings are kind of interesting. Did anybody have a family meeting when they were growing up as a kid? Anybody have that? Okay, so I grew up with family meetings, and I remember dating Stacy, and Stacy was kind of just now getting connected to our family, and she happened to be at our house on one of the days when we were going to have a family meeting. And I didn't like family meetings at my house because they were pretty open, they were pretty raw, and they were pretty honest. And usually if my father or my mother was upset, they'd communicate their frustration with the kids at that moment. And so Stacy couldn't get away from what was going on. She didn't have a ride, so she actually stayed with us for a family meeting. And I remember this family meeting like it was yesterday. My dad was a little bit frustrated with me about my lack of flexibility around some things that he wanted me to do at the house. And so he looked at me and he pulled out a straw and he looked at me and he said, "Colin, there are only one type of straw that we can have in this house, and they must be bendy straws. You must be flexible." And I remember looking at Stacy thinking, this is the day when Stacy forever leaves me. There's no way she wants to join this kind of family, right? Bendy straw metaphors. And so I was a little bit nervous about what that was gonna mean. Like, this was her first interaction with our family. Wasn't a normal interaction, but it was kind of a normal interaction. Is this gonna be okay early on in our relationship? And 14 years later, as of September 12th, she's still around, praise God. And what's exciting about the whole bendy straw thing is Stacy now just uses it to make fun of my dad when he's not flexible. And so it's 14 years later, and if he's frustrated that we're running a few minutes late and we're babysitting, Stacy will just say, "Bendy straw, Bob," and just keep on walking by. And so here's the deal. If you're new here, it's definitely going to be like, today feels like a family meeting, because that's what it is. And as you're here, it may be like, okay, am I kind of on the outside looking in? And we want you to know we're excited that you're here, and we would invite you to just come and stay a while. Maybe today you can just pretend like you're Kimmy Gibbler from Full House and just pretend that this is your house, or Eddie Haskell from Leave It to Beaver, right? Just kind of be that person. Or my personal favorite, you can be like Steve Urkel from Family Matters. Like, we're just glad that you guys are here with us as we have a very important, I think, family meeting. I want to start by asking you this question. Do you know how Nona Church began? Do you know how Nona Church began? I want to tell you that story because I remember it. I was sitting in a boardroom in downtown Orlando about 5 years ago with our elders, praying and considering what God would have us do as a church. And to be honest with you, the idea of a church in Lake Nona wasn't even a blip on our radar 5 years ago. Vista Church, which is located about 20 minutes north of where we are right now, was one church in one location. And we were entering the fourth year of a building that we had just built, and we had just broken the kind of 400-person barrier, and God was doing some pretty unique things in the life of our community. And we were considering what would be our next steps as a local church. And I remember that day, it was as if God chose to come and meet us in a powerful way in the midst of prayer. And I remember one of our elders writing on a whiteboard these words, and we began to ask the Lord how he might put them together. Well, what was it that God was calling us to do? And that was the day that on our whiteboard, this vision was birthed, that we would be a family of missional communities, connecting people with God from Southeast Orlando to the world. God had given us a vision to love the neighborhoods of Southeast Orlando, not by just building one large church building where people needed to drive a long distance to get to, but by starting instead neighborhood churches that were in, for, and by the people and their communities. We wanted to start churches that reflected the uniqueness of their neighborhood rather than promoting a singular church brand. That's why this church is called Nona Church and not Vista Church Lake Nona Campus or Vista Church South. We valued more that people would be able to identify their local church with the community they were a part of than the brand that they were affiliated with. What would transpire over the next few years would be a group of about 40 or so people who were living in the Lake Nona area, who began to reach out and love people in their community. They started doing things like neighborhood summer clubs and putting together potlucks and barbecues in the neighborhood. And slowly but surely, these people began to reach out to their neighbors as they were attending Vista. And people would begin to ask them, hey, when is Vista going to start something here in Lake Nona? When is Vista going to start a church down here? But there was an obstacle that was in our way. It felt like a mountain that seemed immovable. There were no locations for us to meet as a church in Lake Nona. So as much as we loved the idea of being able to be connected in the community, we just thought it would be an impossible endeavor to actually find a place to meet. But did you know that God loves to move mountains. Did you know that? Well, he did on Mother's Day of 2014. By happenstance, I received a phone call from one of our staff guys who was actually volunteering for a Sunday morning, and he found out that the Lake Nona YMCA would be vacant starting that week because the church that was meeting here closed down on Mother's Day of 2014. And in less than 2 weeks, hear this, we had met with YMCA officials, we had contracts signed, and we began plans to launch our first public services in October of 2014. And on October 19th, 2014, 89 people gathered in this half of the gym, and Nona Church was birthed. And the last time we got together on September 3rd of 2017, just 3 years later, 356 people gathered at this same YMCA to worship our King, Jesus. Is that not incredible? Now to illustrate this, I want to do something really quick, and I'm going to need your help. If you were a part of that original launch team, like the first people that were here in 2014, would you just stand up quickly? Would you just stand up real quick? I just want to see you guys. That's awesome. That is really cool. Go ahead and be seated. Now let's do something really fun. If you were not a part of the original launch team of Nona Church, would you please stand? Let's put our hands together for these guys. Isn't that incredible? That's awesome. There is no doubt that we have seen God move in a mighty way, which begs this question, will we see him do it again? And I, along with our elders, really believe, as we've been evaluating the next steps that God has for our church, that we believe the answer is yes. We believe that we have just begun to scratch the surface of all that God has planned for our faith family. And as we consider what God wants our unique contribution to be in our corner of the city in Lake Nona, we think there is a word that epitomizes what God has called us to be. And it's a small word, and it's a word that doesn't seem like it means like a lot, but it's found in the words of Jeremiah. You know, Jeremiah was someone God used to write letters to God's people thousands of years ago, a time when the Israelites, who were known then as God's people, had been relocated. So quick raise of hands, how many of the people in this room have relocated to Lake Nona? Just really quick, how many relocators do we have? Like a lot of us, right? That's the story of Lake Nona. No one's actually from here. But you can put yourself in their shoes. You know what it feels like to relocate, don't you? These people had left what they knew. They had left the communities and friends that they had, and they had to resettle in this place called Babylon. And in the midst of their relocation, there was a sense that they weren't going to stay there too long. And so there's this tension around, okay, what do we do while we're here? And God gave the people of Israel in the city of Babylon some powerful words that I think are his words to us today as Nona Church. Listen to what he tells his people in Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 5 through 7. He says, build homes and plan to stay. Would you say that next word with me on the count of three? 1, 2, 3. Multiply. Do not dwindle away. And work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. In these verses, we see God give specific commands to those who consider themselves his people. Things like build and plan and plant and multiply and work and pray. And with all of these incredible verbs, there's a reason why God cares so much, and it's tied to this small, simple word that is so easy to overlook. In fact, we overlook it all the time. It's 3 letters. It's the word for. You see, when you are for something, it means that you're an advocate for it. When you're for something, it means that you are willing to sacrifice on its behalf. When you are for something, it means you are invested in its success. So the question I've been asking is, how can our church be for our city? And I think it starts with being for the immediate neighborhoods that make up our community, for places like North Lake Park and East Park and Moss Park Ridge and the Enclave at Moss Park and North Shore, Laureate Park, St. Cloud, Vista Lakes, Village Walk, and Eagle Creek. I think it starts with becoming a church that's not just known for what it takes from the community, but what it gives back to the community. About being a church that's for Nona. And what would a church that's for Nona do? That's the question I've been asking. What is it that a church that's for Nona would do as it pertains to serving it? And how would a church that's for Lake Nona serve its community? And the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced of this truth. And I want you to write this down. It's long, but it is so important. That a church that is for Nona would risk what they know, release what they have, and repeat what they do. Because God's mission, hear me, it is way too big. The need is too great. And how many of us agree that the gospel is just too good to keep it to ourselves? And when I think about the first group of people that began meeting here almost 3 years ago, that 80 people, I see people who are willing to do those three things. They were willing to risk. Think about what it cost them to start and to launch Nona Church. They were willing to risk the comfort of what they knew, a church building that didn't involve tear down and set up, can I get an amen? Strong existing ministries for kids and families that already existed, but because they were for Nona, they were willing to risk what they knew so they could grasp something that God had for them. And I think about the fact that we've been able to celebrate baptisms for people like the Duncan kids, and for Elvie Rosa, and for Finley Wall, and for Jasenia now Shanko, and for Isaiah, an 18-year-old young man who came to our church just 2 weeks ago, and countless others, because the people were willing to risk. How many of us are thankful for those people who are willing to risk to start Nona Church? Can we give them an applause and thank them so much? Yeah, they were willing to risk. Here's the second thing. When I think about that first group of people, when I think about that first group of people, I think about a people that pioneered our church because they were willing to release. They were willing to release what they had, existing relationships with others. There was some heartbreak when we started Nona Church. The financial commitments they had made to build the Vista facility. You may not know this, but in the middle of our launching of Nona Church, we were doubling the size of our Vista location, and many of you actually wrote checks to help build a building that you don't ever see. And I think about people like Dwayne and Cindy, my dear friends, who were baptized and married in the same week at our church in our pool, and countless others of us who have found community in life. And one of the 19 community groups we now offer because people were willing to release what they had to receive what God had in store. Risk, release. And the third word is repeat. Think about the people that have been here over the last year. Many of you, as I look into this crowd, many of you. Do you guys remember when we only had one service? Anybody remember those good old days? Anybody remember that? Right? Yeah. A few months ago, I encouraged us to consider a test run, right? Just 10 weeks. And that test run turned into our new normal where we could not even begin to dream of trying to have one service on a Sunday morning here at the YMCA. You may not know this, but in those simple 10 weeks when we went to 2 services, where we repeated what we did, went from 1 to 2, right? Did the same thing twice. Our church grew by over 70 people in a 10-week span. One of my favorite stories is the story of the Clover family, who literally moved to Lake Nona, relocated the Saturday before Easter, found us online, and came to our second service because we offered a second service, won a gift card to Pig Floyd's, and has been with our church ever since. Risk, release, and repeat. And as I look at this room and as I'm going to teach again at the 10:30 service, the question that I think you're asking, the question I'm asking is what's next? What is next for us? But before we get into that, I want you to see a small taste of just what God has done in our community. Why don't you watch it?
The Lake Nona community is growing. What was once vacant land is now booming with the expansion of neighborhoods and businesses. With this growth came the thousands of people who are calling this neighborhood their home. But home is more than a house. These people have a need to be invited in, to be served, to be loved. Like all of us, they have a need for God, for salvation, for real relationship with God, a life lived to the fullest, which only Jesus can provide. It is happening. In the past 12 months, 180 more people have started coming to Nona Church for our Sunday gatherings. That's double compared to last year. And this year, we've seen 28 people indicate a first-time decision to follow Jesus. And today, we are launching 4 new community groups. Jesus has given us a mission to connect people with God from Southeast Orlando to the world. And it starts here, in our community, in our schools, in our neighborhoods. It starts in Nona. This mission is a choice we each have to make. It can't just be part of us. This mission will take all of us.
So today, it is my pleasure to announce that we are officially launching the 4 Nona Initiative. The 4 Nona Initiative is a 3-year stewardship campaign that focuses on putting down roots in the Lake Nona community. So we will be here not just for a little while, but for a long, long time to come. It involves 2 simultaneous pursuits, a short and long-term solution to the growth we are experiencing as a church family. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that today. Our first pursuit is to identify, secure, and develop a permanent facility in Lake Nona to serve as a hub for our current ministry and our future endeavors of launching more neighborhood churches in the rapidly expanding communities of Moss Park, Narcoossee, St. Cloud, and the Innovation Way corridors. We are not done yet. We are just getting started. I want you to imagine with me a family of neighborhood churches throughout Lake Nona, meeting at places like this YMCA in North Lake Park, local schools that have yet to be built, but all of them with a central hub for student ministry, office space, women's and men's events during the week, a place for families to connect in a safe, fun environment, a 24/7 presence in the community of Lake Nona, a place where we might be able to partner with organizations where young moms can drop off their kids to daycare, walk across the lobby, meet in a coffee shop where they can have a Bible study and get connected in real relationship. That is a hope and the vision we believe God is calling our church into. We believe that the time is now to take this step of faith. And we are already in conversations with potential opportunities, which I'll be excited to share with you in the coming months. But you need to know our bank has given us the okay, and it is time to move forward. Now, any permanent facility we identify will take time to develop. Can you agree with that? Y'all know building projects take a long time. Years, in fact. However, we are also beginning to feel the squeeze at our YMCA location. This is our 9 a.m., okay? After several months worth of research and identifying best practices among other fast-growing mobile churches in the area, we are at a place where we will max out the capacity of the YMCA when our attendance reaches more than 400 people on a weekend. That is, simply put, an average of 40 to 60 more people on a weekly basis, or in other words, when 10 or 15 more families decide that Nona Church is going to be their home. Suffice it to say, we think that it may be realistic a little bit that we will grow by 10 to 15 families before we identify a permanent facility. Do you think that's probably realistic? Yeah. We also think it is poor stewardship to not create more space and opportunities right now for people to engage with what God is doing in our faith family. So with that in mind, the second pursuit of the 4 Nona Initiative is that we are beginning the process of building the launch team for our second neighborhood church in Lake Nona so that we can create more room for more people to connect with God. Now, before you freak out, this isn't happening tomorrow. In fact, part of the reason why I'm telling you this now is so that we will have ample time to build the teams and the infrastructure that is necessary to have 2 neighborhood churches in Lake Nona, and do it in a way that doesn't feel sudden or rushed as a church body and family. By the time we end up launching our second neighborhood church, my hope is that you're going to be saying this: it's about time. This place is cramped and y'all need to get out of here. That's what I'm hoping is the attitude or perspective that we have. 3 years ago, God made a way when there seemed to be no way to launch Nona Church. And today we're believing God that we're going to see it happen again. So I want to invite you into what this means for you, what this means for me. What does it mean to be for Nona? And I think it's around 3 statements that I'd like you to write down in your notes. There's some fill in the blanks for you. The first one is this: I am for Nona when I pray. I'm for Lake Nona and the community and for the people that I call my neighbors and my friends when I begin to pray for their very lives, their hearts and their souls. And so what we're going to be doing over the next 3 months between now and really the end of November is we want to see as many people as possible in our church sign up to be a part of the team that is praying for clarity on where our next step might be, where that location is that we ought to say yes to, who the people are that are going to be raised up to be our next launch team. And the way that we're asking you to simply step into that is to email pray@nonachurch.com. And every single week, you're going to receive a curated list of ways that you can pray for the Lake Nona community and some scriptures and devotions that will help you in that way. That's your next step. Simply email pray@nonachurch.com. The second thing is this: I am for Nona when I participate. I am for Nona when I participate. To move into the next season that God has for us will mean that we will need to double the recipe. You ever had some people come over and you realize, oh my gosh, there are more coming? You ever had that happen? You got to double that recipe, right? That's like the word that the Lord's given me. It's not super spiritual, but it's that, double the recipe. And I'm like, Lord, if you want me to eat more food, I'm willing to do it. Here's it is. We need 2 of everything. We need double the community group leaders. We need double the worship team. We need double the Kid City volunteers. And here's what that means. If you're a friend of the Nona Church family, just keep on joining us. Come here and stay a while. Make some friends, get connected, have a good time. But if this is your church family, if this is your home, if this is the place that when people ask you, where do you go to church, you say, Nona, that's my church. If this is your church family, now is the time that all of us need to step up and buy in. We can't wait any longer. Now is the moment where all of us need to step in, because guess who the ingredients are to doubling this recipe? It's me and it's you. So how do you do that? The first thing is we want you to attend Discover Nona and become a member. We know that for many of us, we've maybe been around for a while and membership sounds like a new idea. I want you to hear membership is not something that gives you like a fast pass through the Kid City check-in line, right? It's not about extra, value. It's really about saying, I want to be a part of this family and I want to be known as a family member, not just a friend. Discover Nona is an environment and a place where you get to hear more about our vision, you get to hear more about our mission. You actually help to discover what your gifts and abilities are, what your greatest contribution might be, and we actually coach you through that very process. Discover Nona 101 is going to start next week after the 10:30 gathering, and I'm praying that we'll have a good number of you show up that are ready to take this next step. The other thing is join a community group. You've seen 19 potential options for you up here. It's time to do that. It's time to be known and to belong to a community and get connected. And lastly, we're going to ask you to serve on a team. It takes all of us to make this environment happen. I say this all the time. Our church is not built off of the talent of a few. It's built off the contributions of many. Over 150 of you volunteer to make church happen in our community. But there are over 3, now almost 400 of us that call this place home. And it's time for all of us to step across the line and to get involved with what God is doing, because we want to be a church that is for Lake Nona. And to be for something means that you're in it. It means that you're invested. It means that you're willing to give something because you believe in it. And the last thing we're going to ask you to do is prepare. Have you ever had an opportunity to move on something, but you just weren't prepared for the opportunity? You ever been there for a good deal, but you didn't have a way to jump on it? We don't want to miss God's opportunities for us as a church because we weren't prepared. So the third and final component of the For Nona initiative is a 3-year financial commitment to what we will sacrifice above and beyond our regular giving so we can be aware of what resources are at our disposal so that we can move quickly and rapidly on a parcel of land or a long-term lease so that we can establish a permanent facility here in Lake Nona. We've got all of the ducks in a row. We've got the infrastructure that's in place. Now it's about our commitment to make it happen. And the way that we do this is simply by saying this: would you pray and ask God over the next 3 months, what it is that he is calling you to do above and beyond what you give on a regular basis for this special endeavor. I want to talk to you about a couple of dates that are really important. The first one is this. Starting on September 24th, that's next week Sunday to October 1st, we're going to be hosting Vision Nights at our Vista campus. And here's what's going to happen. If you're a community group or a part of a community group, all of the community groups that meet on Sunday will not meet in homes on that day. They'll come to the Vista location. If you're not a part of a community group, you can pick any night of the week to come and join. And what we're going to be doing over that time is receiving feedback from you on what you believe a facility that is for Nona would look like and feel like. What are the things that Lake Nona needs? We want to get your feedback and your input on what it is that we're creating and designing. But secondly, we want to give you a tour of our Vista location. We want to give you a picture of what could be, the process that we have gone through already once, now twice, when it comes to building out facilities, so that we can have our eyes kind of fixed on what this could potentially mean for us in our community. And so make it a priority to be there, because we want to hear your voice and we desperately want your feedback as we step into this space. And hear me when I say this. We are not building a monument to us. Do you hear me? We are not building a monument to us. We are building a hub for the community that happens to be the place that the church comes alive in our setting, in our environment. So we need to know what Lake Nona needs so we can create the kind of infrastructure and the kind of space that's going to be a blessing to our community. Here's the second thing. We're turned 3 on October 22nd. Third birthdays are really cool, aren't they? I like third birthdays. They're fantastic because you get cake. And what I want to do on our birthday celebration is simply come together. Everyone is getting a free I Am For Nona t-shirt. We're going to ask you to wear that on October 22nd. We're going to take a big family picture. We're going to have a potluck on that day and make it a priority to be here as we celebrate what God has done over the last 3 years. And last but not least, we'll have Commitment Sunday on November 19th. It's an opportunity for all of us to come together and to bring to God what we believe he has called us to do. And being able to identify what those resources are will allow us to move forward as a church, being able to launch our second location and have a more permanent facility or option in our community. I hope that as you're hearing me say this, that what you're realizing is we are not even close to being done. But can I be honest for a minute? Is it okay if I'm honest? I'm scared to death. I'm really afraid, because this is change and it feels big. Can we agree? Does this feel a little bit big? It's change and it feels big. And if I'm really honest and vulnerable, I'm a little bit nervous too. But you know, we serve a God who fed 5,000 people with a kid's bagged lunch. And we serve a God who took a motley crew of guys who had no education, trained them up for 3 years, let them go, and they transformed the world. We served a God who loves to take ordinary people and allow them to make an extraordinary difference in eternity. And I love the fact that everyday people like me and everyday people like you have the opportunity to change the legacy, not only of families, but the eternities of families, because of our willingness to be for the community that God has placed us in. And what blows my mind about this is that there were 80 people just 3 years ago who were willing to be for Nona. And now we have 400 people that can be for Nona. Imagine what could happen if we all jumped in. I think it would be fair to say we've seen God move. Is that not the case? Let's see him do it again.